Howdy folks, hope you're all having a good one. Welcome back to another episode of Mingles with Jingles. And before we crack on with the meat and bones of today's episode, there are a couple of things that I really do need to mention. One of which, at least, I really should have mentioned 2 weeks ago when I first heard about it, but I keep forgetting because, well, I'm kind of crap. You may remember a World Tanks live streamer called Aging Jedi, now goes by the name of Mark GFL, and he and one of his friends, who goes by the name of Steve, have taken it upon themselves to get involved with a charity called Driving Ukraine. What these guys do is they buy vehicles here in the UK, primarily things like 4x4s, pickup trucks, ambulances. They then have them modified by volunteers here in the UK, and then they drive them all across Europe to Ukraine, where the vehicles are delivered to evacuation teams, ambulance crews, first aid responders, international volunteer medics, humanitarian bomb disposal units, hospitals, and so on and so on. As you can imagine, none of this happens for free. And Mark and Steve have set themselves the goal of getting just one of these vehicles delivered to Ukraine at a cost of £5,000. And they're more than halfway towards achieving this goal. They plan to actually deliver the vehicle next month in February, and they could use a little bit more help in making sure that this sort of thing happens. So if this sort of thing interests you and you'd like to give a little money, there is a link in the video description to Mark and Steve's Driving Ukraine webpage, where you can see all the details of exactly what it is that they're trying to accomplish, and if you feel like it, helping them out by giving a donation. They did actually ask if I wanted to go along with them when they deliver the vehicle. I mean, maybe if they'd asked me 10 years ago, but I'm way too old to be driving around war zones and sleeping in the back of trucks. So, but I'm entirely happy to let you all know about what exactly it is that they're trying to achieve, because, you know, every little helps. So that's Mark and Steve Driving Ukraine. And the other thing, and it's also charity related, that I really do need to mention this week, and also something that I really should have mentioned last week, but hey, what can I say? I'm crap, is the charity giving app that I use, Bono. Now, I've mentioned this app before in other episodes of Mingles with Jingles, and in light of what's been happening in California in the last couple of weeks, Bono are setting up a way for people to directly assist with the California wildfire disaster relief. Just click the other link in the video description and it will take you to a page where you can download the Bono app, and as well as assisting with the California wildfire disaster relief, you can help out with any other charity that takes your fancy. So, those are my 2 good deeds for the day done. Eventually. At long last. When I finally remember to get around to it. So, moving on. What's been happening in the world of PC games this week? Quite a bit, actually. They just released the system specifications for Assassin's Creed Shadows, and yep, it's another game like Indiana Jones and the Great Circle and the forthcoming Doom the Dark Ages that requires ray tracing before it will even let you install it. Mighty suspicious that they only announced this the month before the game goes on sale, but actually looking at the required specifications, they're not that bad. I mean, sure, if you want to play the game with, if you want to play the game at all, but if you want to play the game with what they call extended ray tracing, playing it at 4K resolution with 60 frames per second, all of the bells and whistles turned on, you will need an Intel 13700K or a Ryzen 7 7800X 3D processor with an RTX 4090 graphics card. But I suppose, you know, maximum graphics, that's kind of to be expected. But down at the other end of the scale, if your hardware is a little more modest and you want to play at 1080p with 30 frames per second on low visual settings, so in other words, having it look like a dog's breakfast, you can get away with an Intel 8700K, a Ryzen 5 3600, and this is kind of surprising, a GeForce GTX 1070 with only 8GB of VRAM. It will probably look terrible, but you will at least be able to play it. For the vast majority, because let's face it, most PC users still play at 1080p without all of the fancy ray tracing turned on. The bad news is that if you want to play at 1080p with a reasonable 60 frames per second frame rate, the system specifications take a rather large hike. in order to achieve that, and again, we're only playing at 1080p, and this is with most of the ray tracing still turned off, you're going to need a Core i5 11600K, a Ryzen 5 5600X, and an RTX 3060 Ti. Or if you're using a Radeon card, an RX 6700 XT. And that's just to play at 1080p at 60 frames per second. And again, with most of the ray tracing still turned off. So, if for some reason you did want to play Assassin's Creed Shadows, you're still going to need some fairly beefy hardware even to play it at the lower end of what the game's capable of delivering. So, yet another reason not to bother with Assassin's Creed Shadows. While we're on the subject of ridiculous hardware, at the time of recording this video, we got 4 days to go before the RTX 5090 hits the marketplace. And scalpers are already trying to flip RTX 5090 GPUs that they don't even own yet on eBay for anything up to $7,000 each. This for a card which, allow me to remind you, has an MSRP of $2,000. Although looking at the MSRP in pounds sterling, it's not actually that much cheaper. Which is kind of alarming because $2,000 in my currency is actually more like £1,600, not the nearly £2,000 that Nvidia are charging here in the UK. So it looks like I'm getting ripped off by Nvidia even before the scalpers start sticking their noses in. But hey, that's an entirely different story. One of these scalpers on eBay claims to be an employee at a PC retailer who has what he's calling guaranteed slots to buy a limited number of 5090s, and he has no plans to upgrade his current PC, so basically he's snapping up as many of them as he is entitled to buy and then flogging them all on eBay, passing the savings on to you by merely charging at least double what they actually cost to buy in the stores. It's likely to be exactly the same situation as when the 3000 series cards came out, when technically they were available, but nobody was able to buy any because scalpers had bots at all of the PC retailer websites snapping them all up the second they went on sale. So a real person wasn't able to actually buy one of them. I mean, I sincerely hope that's not going to be the case, but, well, it's starting to look like it might be. If this does end up being the case, and, well, like I said, I hope not, but you never know, and you do have your heart set on getting a 50 series graphics card, it might actually be better to just upgrade your whole PC in one go and buy a PC that comes with one of these 50 series cards, which is what I plan to do. You see, I'm in the, I suppose, enviable and very lucky position of being somebody who plays games and makes videos for a living, so every time I buy a new PC, I can just write the expenses off against tax, which is nice. So it kind of makes sense for me to buy the most expensive PC I can possibly afford every time I upgrade my PC, because I reap the tax benefits. And that's what I plan to do in about 4 days when these cards become available. Well, when they become technically available, but more importantly when PCs built around them start appearing in the various different retailers' websites. So I will be upgrading my PC very, very soon, because it seems like, with the release of a new generation of GPU, it seems like a good time to do it, and it just makes sense for me to do it because of the whole being able to write off any hardware purchases against the taxes that I pay situation. So yeah, new PC time, which means the PC that I'm actually recording this episode of Mingles with Jingles on will become my backup PC. Funny story about my actual backup PC. This is the one that I bought from PC Specialist years ago, and then within a month of buying it, the CPU started overheating because the cooler failed. And it was just unusable. And it was covered by a return to base warranty, so, I contacted them and said, yeah, it's broken, fix it please, because that's what I'm paying you for, and they came to collect it within a couple of days, and then I never heard from them for 3 months. It was supposed to be a 2-week RMT process, pick up, fix, and then return back to me. 2 weeks. It was right before Christmas, so, things were kind of busy for them, but apparently they just left it in the back of a warehouse and forgot about it. And of course, without a PC, I had to rush out to a local supplier and buy a new PC so that I could continue to work in the 2 weeks the PC Specialist was supposed to have my PC for. 2 weeks came and went. I figured, well, you know, it's the Christmas period. I'll give them a bit of slack. And I don't actually need it back right now because I've just bought a brand new PC, which, again, fortunately, I was able to write off against taxes. But then those weeks stretched into months, and I started getting a bit concerned. And I mentioned it in an episode of Mingles.business. I don't know if you guys remember this. And apparently word got back to PC specialists, tech support people. They have their own forums, apparently. And one of them had the balls to say, what kind of idiot doesn't know how to repair a faulty cooler? I'll tell you what kind of idiot doesn't know how to repair a faulty cooler. The kind of idiot who's paying you to repair the faulty cooler, something that you promised would be done within 2 weeks, and 2.5 months later, I'm still fucking waiting. That's the kind of idiot who doesn't know how to repair a faulty cooler. Funnily enough, within 3 days of that episode of Mingles going out, I got the computer back fixed with an apology that it had basically been sitting at the back of the warehouse for nearly 3 months. They'd just forgotten about it. So I fired it up, tested it, everything appeared to run fine. And then it's been sitting underneath my desk because it's the backup PC for the best part of a year and a half. Meanwhile, in the room next door, Rita's PC has kind of been on its last legs for a while now. She's been struggling to stream at anything more than 720p. I mean, it's not a bad system. It's a decent system for gaming on, but gaming and streaming at the same time does put a lot of extra strain on your system. So I said, well, go ahead and use my backup PC. It's got an RTX 3080 in there. It's got like 64, because I bought it for video processing, so it's got 64 gigabytes of RAM. You know, it's a decent PC still, even if it is a couple of years old. So she was very happy. Transferred all of her software over to my backup PC, and she started streaming with it. And it was great. She could actually stream at 1080p for once. And then it started crashing, with the fans getting very loud and a lot of heat coming from the case. You'll never guess what had gone wrong with it. Yep, the cooler had failed. Oh my god. Yeah, so PC specialists can kiss my arse. I'm never buying anything from them again. I mean, it may not be their fault. There may be something to do with the fact that it's a water cooling system on the CPU and it's been sitting unused for a year and a half. That might be a factor. I don't know. It's just really, really suspicious that the one thing that went wrong under guarantee the first time with this PC, and the one thing that took them 3 months to fix, is the first thing that's gone wrong again the second the PC starts getting used on a regular basis. So yeah, I'm done giving them the benefit of the doubt. So the good news for Rita at least is that when I do get this new PC, she can get the one that I'm using right now, which is still a pretty kick-ass system. It's got an RTX 4080 in it. It's not bad at all. So hopefully within 2 weeks or so, I'll be on a new PC. Rita will be using this one. I've got somebody coming around to actually, because I think I'm done with water coolers, and just putting a Ryzen 7 cooler on the backup PC so that is at least functional, and will stay functional regardless of how long it sits under the desk gathering dust. So everybody's a winner. Although, you know, make no mistake, this is going to be an expensive couple of weeks because, you know, if you're buying something based, I mean, the 5090 itself, you're not getting a lot of change out of $2,000. In fact, you're not getting, which again, I'm still pissed off about. You're not actually getting, despite the exchange rate, a lot of change out of £2,000. But, you know, gee, thanks, NVIDIA. No, you're welcome. A really good CPU, shit ton of memory. I'm going to need 4 terabytes of SSD. I thought, because the one that I'm running at the moment has 2 terabytes. Who would have ever thought you'd need more than 2 terabytes of storage space? Yeah. Well, you do. So, yeah. But it's going to be worth it. And I am, of course, as I said, regardless of how expensive it's going to be, it's at least going to reduce the amount of taxes that I have to pay next year. So, you know, there's always an upside. Well, there's several upsides. I'm getting a new PC. And I'm going to be able to write it off against taxes. So, more than one upside. It's all good news. Well, anyway, I thought I'd end this episode of Mingles with Jingles with some gaming news that, well, I thought at least was kind of amusing. So there's 2 news articles that I wanted to share with you. And the first is to do with the current plague of AI bots scouring the internet and scraping, which is a polite way of saying stealing other people's work in order to train their AI on. And there's an anonymous coder that's gotten kind of sick of it and has built a fly trap for them. So this anonymous coder, who goes by the name of R&B on the 404 Media forums, announced that he's developed a digital fly trap designed to keep these AI scraping bots in a virtual doom loop forever, scouring the same web pages over and over and over until somebody human comes along and tells them to stop. Apparently it only really works because these bots are, well, really kind of stupid. He said, "It's less like flypaper and more like an infinite maze holding a minotaur, except the crawler is the minotaur and it can't get out. The typical web crawler doesn't appear to have a lot of logic. It downloads a URL, and if it sees links to other URLs, it downloads those too. His trap generates random links that always point back to itself, so the crawler downloads those new links, and the trap happily just returns more and more lists of links pointing back to itself." Now, admittedly, this kind of digital flytrap doesn't solve one of the core issues with the absurd proliferation of these AI web crawlers scraping the web and stealing other people's work, in that while they're doing this, they're consuming stupid amounts of power. So, I mean, that's still happening, but hey, at least they're not stealing other people's work in the process. And the final amusing piece of gaming news that I wanted to mention is to do with the Dead or Alive video game series. Now, I'm not a huge fan of Dead or Alive. I've never really been into beat-em-ups, but, well, Dead or Alive hasn't really been about beat-em-ups much in the last couple of years anyway. Given what the Dead or Alive series has become in recent years, it might be fairly easy to forget that before the release of the first Dead or Alive beach volleyball spin-off, it was actually taken fairly seriously as a fighting game. Nowadays, of course, according to PC Gamer, and they're not wrong, the Dead or Alive series is a joke, promising that new entries will be less jiggly, and that's a quote, then turning around and flogging off dozens of bikini, maid, and schoolgirl costumes as downloadable content. Which is why it is completely absurd to read Tomotoshi Nishimura, the executive in charge of their publisher's legal affairs division, say that they had no choice but to take action against fan art that might damage the image of the Dead or Alive cast because their creators think of them like daughters. He went on to reveal that the publisher every year takes action against up to 3,000 pieces of community fan art posted on social media sites every year because it harms the virtuous image of the Dead or Alive ladies. The virtuous Dead or Alive ladies that the publisher is happy to sell you schoolgirl, maid, and bikini costume DLC for, while boasting of enhanced titty and butt jiggle physics as a major selling point in new games in the series. These virtuous ladies that the developers think of as their daughters. You couldn't make this shit up. And on that very creepy and slightly dubious bombshell, that's it for this week's episode of Mingles with Jingles. Don't forget, Mark GFL and his friend Steve driving Ukraine, link in the video description. California wildfires, link in the video description. Thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed it, and as always, take care, and I'll catch you next time.